Thanks, Mary. And Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was just such an amazing, 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 amazing Jewish teacher, um, really saw awe and wonder as the precursor to faith, and that it's really awe that and wonder that brings us into our full humanity. So he's he has been gone a long time. May his memory be for blessing. But he's stunning if you ever want to look him up or look up any of his work. But I think, the whole idea is in these 10 days, we're asked to think a little bit about, well, what might have we have done in the last year that wasn't so skillful? Is it somebody we need to apologize? Is there needs something we need to rethink? And if so, maybe we want to approach that person. So that's a big piece. It's almost like a big purification practice. And there are two things I want to say about that, and then I'll sort of move on. But this year, I've just thought about how these 10 days could be a time to really just reflect on, how have I been operating in the world this year and maybe in years past, and how might I like to change that up a little bit, so that it goes a little bit beyond just thinking about maybe what I've done that wasn't so skillful, and just goes, actually I could think like some of the ways I just do too much. This is like something I seem to not be able to give up. But I'm not sure that's good for me. So I might need to apologize to myself, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's an amazing, energetic time bubble that we're in these 10 days. And to think that there are Jewish people all over the whole globe who are honoring this energetic field. And so, a field is a field, a holy field is a holy field. And as Reb Zalman would say, our job is to strengthen the field, and we can do that from any number of different perspectives. So I had meant to mention that. So I am grateful, Anna, to just your name reminded me of that. So I think that's everybody new. And so in terms of the world of announcements, one of the things I wanted to say, I'm going to say a little bit about the retreat we had. Not a whole lot, because we all didn't go on it, but it was pretty seriously wonderful. And there were some exciting events, which I do want to talk about. Speaking of Tara helping out. But as a result of that, I was really, because I brought this book, and this is a practice book, that these are the original translations that Lodrö Rinpoche did of these sadhanas in 1996. And then he asked me if I would sort of edit it, clean up the English. And, I was like, okay. I was like, me? You want me to do that anyway? Trust me, I don't read or teach or anything Tibetan, but he had translated into English. So he asked me to do that. And I thought, well, sure. And then as I went through it, I realized, well, gosh, it would be nice to have like a little glossary of what all these terms mean. I did a thing in the back where I put all 21 praises, all 21 mantras, and the meanings of the mantras all together. So you can read right through them. It's pretty easy. Now that's also in the book, but it's just in a different form. There are a couple of poems in here. The seven-limbed mandala Tatara is in here. And then just these original texts. And so it occurred to me during the retreat, there are some people who might be interested in having this. And I will say that, almost all this information is in the book, but not all of it is in it. And it is a really easy reference thing. And so I haven't reprinted these in a long time. Seems like the last time was sort of in the $15 to $20 range. So we just bind them and put, very heavy duty plastic backing on it. You know, I don't know how much it's going to cost, and if you add shipping and all that kind of stuff, it could be in the $25 to $35 range. It won't be more than that, could be less. But if you're interested, if anybody would like to have one of those, you know, just you can email me directly, or you can email Monica, and she'll get that to me, and then we'll just figure out how to make that happen. Or it may turn out that we'll put up something on the website where you order the tarot cards, and that's where you can order the book. But we'll figure it out, and we'll send you an email. But it would be helpful to us to know who's interested, because then we can go ahead and get a count and know how many to print. Thomas is out of hand to say I'm very interested. So yeah. So, but it'd be better if you email, and maybe email Monica if that's okay with you. I just volunteered Monica to do that, and then we'll get a count. And you know, you can think about it and all this kind of stuff too. But anyway, I think it's a helpful resource, and I wanted to be sure to mention that. And then I think the thing I want to say about the retreat, it was so lovely just to be together in person, as y'all can imagine. But we had some pretty amazing excitement occur that I think Tara helped us with. So luckily, it turns out everybody was flying into Raleigh-Durham, where I live, except for Trisha and Kylie. And they were flying into Newbern, which is closer to the retreat center. But on Wednesday night, it became apparent that the hurricane was going to drop 4 inches of rain on the retreat center, the island where the retreat center is. And none of us could stand the thought of thinking about people, you know, hydroplaning across the highway, trying to get down there on Thursday. So on Wednesday night, we just emailed everybody and said, come to Raleigh, get a room, and meet us at this restaurant. And the restaurant is directly across the street from Pullen Memorial Baptist Church. And we're going to start the retreat there. And so that's what everybody did. And the thing that was amazing for me, and I hope it was for other people too, is that Pullen is where the original Tara group met for years and years and years pre-pandemic. And we meet in this chapel, which is a freestanding building from the church. And I don't know, whoever was there, Liz, maybe you can get, I think it's the ceilings are like 30, 40 feet high. And there are no symbols in there. There are no crosses. There are no whatever. It's just this beautiful open space with a labyrinth, an inlaid wooden labyrinth in the floor. So we all had dinner together. We walked across the street and we started the retreat there. And then Friday morning we did the second session, and then we drove down to the beach in the sunshine with no floods, no high winds, and no rain. So, all right. So then we got there and we had the retreat, and it was really lovely. And then people were just, this is what happens actually. Our meetings are sort of a microcosm of what happened in that retreat, where people just contribute so much. People really bring their own wisdom, their own teachings. We just learn so much from each other. And one thing that was really funny is like there's this hand mudra that goes with the 7-limbed mandala. And you can see, if I'm not trying to teach anybody how to do it, I can just say, yeah, there's this hand mudra. But I was sitting there thinking, okay, I want to teach y'all how to do it. So you take this finger, do that, and this finger, and all of a sudden I'm like, what? I don't, what? And I'm just like into this cloud of confusion. And Jean Lampert had just taken a course, what was it, the prior weekend, from Dr. Nita, and she had just learned how to do this mudra. So she gets up and starts walking around the room, showing everybody how to do the mudra. That's what I'm telling you, it takes a village to lead a retreat. So it was really wonderful. And that's just one example. Yeah. So anyway, we had a great time, and then it was time to go. We packed up, we came home. And the next morning comes the famous text that many of us have been privy to receiving the morning after we get home from an event with a lot of people, which was the administrator of the retreat, Miriam McNeish, had tested positive for COVID. So, yeah, so that's right. Oh my God. Well, nobody got it. Nobody got it. And I just think that's sort of miraculous. Maria had been to Kansas to help her brother with this big surgery. I'm sure she brought it home with her. People rode down to the beach in her car with her without a mask on. It's just kind of wild that nobody got it. So I just think that's amazing. So those were the two things that I wanted to share. I just think sometimes we get a lot of help. Well, I know we do. We get a lot of help, and often we get help when we didn't even ask for it. And I'm sitting here looking at Allison, who came early and helped me a ton, me with the bad knee and the bad ankle and this, that, and the other. So, you know, the idea of interconnectedness and help was a real theme of the retreat that got, actualized and lived out. So anyway, I just want to say that. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything about that, but if not, I think what I'm going to do is do another beginning, which is to actually ring this bell that I'm very fond of. And this is just the sound of one bell. And I like to do this kind of to shift out of this more announcement, conversational back and forth into just a little bit of settling. So I'm just going to ring it one time and say a few things. Yeah, so I just invite you in this moment to that famous image that happens in a lot of meditation suggestions, like to imagine you just got on an elevator and the elevator is going down. Just that sense of, it's almost like falling into your own embodied, incarnate, subtle body, ease and wisdom. It's like the essential Tara that's already inside of us. But sometimes, a lot of times, we can't feel it because there's just so much going on. And that idea of just, it always does feel like a kind of a settling thing. And for me, it always helps to sense myself as really settling into the chair that I'm sitting on. So wherever you are, whatever it is that's supporting you, literally, and to feel your feet on the earth or the floor, but the earth is underneath the floor, and my floors are wooden, so they're definitely earth. Just to feel the support that we have, which is just astonishing and incomprehensible. And to maybe even imagine you can feel the support and the energy of the earth coming up from the center of the earth, coming up, 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 up into your lower chakras and just flowing up into your heart chakra and just sort of flowing out into the world. And yeah, and to just sort of really settle into this deep, deep sense of support. And, just even the support of these folks, we're all here together. And all of us have been practicing something for many years. And many of us have been practicing Tara for many years, but all of us have been practicing in a variety of ways. And so there's a lot of support just in being together, just in this Sangha. And so as you open your eyes again and, just as we like to say, come back into the room, and in this case, come back into everybody else's room. Just to see if you can periodically just return back to that sense of being held and being supported. So, moving on to talk about orange poverty removing Tara. Once again, I always think, how long have I been teaching this? I know what's in here, et cetera, et cetera. And then 48,000 new things appear. And of course, they're all related to that particular Tara. And for me, that's, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Myers-Briggs world, but I'm an INFP. And so Ps have a really hard time deciding which things to include and which things to leave out. We don't want to leave anything out. That's why we're going to be here till 10 o'clock. No, not really. So as usual, I'm sort of just going to say these things as they came to me, and trust me, they are all related to each other. So to think about that, this particular emanation of Tara is thought of as poverty removing. So the backside of impoverishment, I think, is enjoyment and joy. And so that I'd sort of like to kind of keep going back and forth between those two things. And also, it's very interesting because I have had some teachings from Zazen Rinpoche in the 21 Taras according to Surya Gupta, who it was a couple hundred years before Atisha. So she's a little different. The descriptions are different. She's actually wrathful in that lineage, but the idea of her being poverty removing is the same. And one of the things that Zazen Rinpoche emphasized, like in his book, which I'm not sure, I thought I had it right here, but I don't know that I do, Tara in the palm of your hand, it said her right is for increasing enjoyment. I thought, well, that is really interesting. And one of the things he mentioned, which is something I've been thinking about, is that she helps us find the joy in practicing. That there really is joy in practicing. It's not a task. It's not this big thing we ought to do. It's this big thing that can be so beneficial and healing and calming and opening, up all those contracting states we get into, given the world we're living in. That, just practicing Tara can be a source of enjoyment. And you really get that in a Sangha. when you're practicing with other people, because it's kind of fun just to see everybody, right? And just to know where people are and what they're doing and get a little glimpse into their life. So I wanted to mention that, but I also wanted to say, the praise, immediately there are two things this praise just goes directly to, which is, it says, I praise the one who has the power to summon all the assemblies of the protectors of the world. So there you've got the idea that she's an incredible protector, and she has the ability to call on these other protectors. So the idea of protection is there immediately. And the second part of the praise says, she liberates all beings from destitution. So there's the poverty removing thing. Through the letter hum, agitated by her wrathful frowning. So I want to take this apart a little bit, or a lot. And I want to say that the protectors, specifically, that this practice is referring to in the Tibetan tradition, are called Bhumipalas. And Bhumi means earth, and Pala means protector. So this is like calling on the 10 directional protectors. Any of you all are familiar with the medicine wheel, the 4 cardinal directions, the in-between directions, above, below, and within. So she's calling on all the protectors of the world. So it's like, this is another one of those like lit up in neon. If you need help, ask for it. And Tara's a good person to ask, because she can, this sentence, she can assemble all the protectors of the world. And she's doing that on our behalf and also on behalf of the world. And I'll come back to this again later, because I feel like, as we all know, humanity and the earth itself and all the beings on the earth are in a serious crisis. I mean, a serious crisis. We know that. And so to figure out to understand, to contemplate, or to even have it come to us, like, what's my role in all that? What's my contribution? What is the thing I can contribute? And of course, probably some of y'all are involved in stuff that involve actions and petitions and donations and stuff. However, a really huge thing we can all do is practice. Because when we practice, we're impacting it's like I was talking about the field of the days of all. Well, this is really just sending all kinds of positive energy into the field around the earth to do a practice. So if we're doing a practice where even if we aren't specifically imagining, oh, this protector's doing this and this one's doing this, and we don't need to do that, because we don't know what's really needed actually. However, we can ask on behalf of ourselves, we can ask on behalf of people we love, we can ask on behalf of people across the world that we don't know. All the beings on the earth, we can actually ask. And so that's one of the things we can do. So here I wanted to also mention, when we do our refuge practice and we call on our teachers and our ancestors, not just the ones we know, but the ancestors, all the ancestors. One of the things I like to do is to call on the helpful, compassionate spirits of the land. And that's of the land that I'm actually on. So if you were to imagine, like, there are 46 of us here tonight. So if you imagine when we practice tonight, if we call in our teachers, we call in the helpful, compassionate ancestors, we also call on the helpful, compassionate spirits of the land where we live. I can't even imagine how many of them there are. We'll multiply that times 46. How about it, right? So, in a sense, that's a very personal and direct idea of calling on the Bhumipalas, the earth protectors, the assemblies of the protectors of the world. So then this this part of the praise where she says she liberates beings from destitution through the letter hum. So this, the letter hum is a seed syllable, and all the seed syllables have sort of an essential meaning, like one essential meaning. And I'm sure they can mean many other things, and the essential meaning of the syllable hum is wisdom. And wisdom in this tradition, and I think many others, is actually referring to emptiness or referring to the interrelationship of all beings, that there is no such thing as separation. And so this is where I want to do a little breakout session on the Matthew Fox course. And I might just read you a couple of things, because that way I won't be trying to paraphrase what somebody else said. But this part, this was sort of the opening salvo from Brian Swim, who is a physicist, is that he was saying, this massive, I'm sure some of y'all have seen pictures of the Webb telescope, these phenomenal displays of God only knows what, these formations. But they're talking about, physicists for quite a while now have been thinking all this was like 13 to 16 billion years old. Now they're thinking maybe it's 25 billion years old. And what they are saying is that all of this matter, if you want to call it that, all of these particles, everything was just out there in potential. Does that sound familiar? When we talk about space in this tradition, we talk about it as just infinite potential, which is how they described all this. So that there's all this stuff out there in potential, but nothing in relationship to anything else particularly. And so what Swim said is that the conditions arose for an electron and a proton, these two particles, to enter into a relationship with each other for the first time ever, however many billions of years ago that was. The relationship between a single electron and a single proton created a hydrogen atom. And from there, 2 trillion galaxies developed. Just think about that. And so, if what we are thinking about, and this is one of the things they invited us to think about and talked about a whole lot, is how so many things were resting in potential before they actually came into being. And that includes human intelligence. When when things shifted from sort of the level of intelligence that chimpanzees had to the level of intelligence that humans had. But all that was in potential, had not been actualized. And then it was. So I think that let me see here just a second. So here's some of the things. This is what some of the things I thought I would just read. It's not very much. But in the same sense that occurred because of a relationship, the idea is that the relationships we enter into in any given moment enable the universe to bring forward a higher level of complexity because of that relationship. And then he was talking about even if those particles, those two particles, had some level of consciousness, and that's hard to imagine what it would have been, but they certainly couldn't possibly have known that they were instrumental in building 2 trillion galaxies. And so what Brian and Matthew were talking about is that we're living in a time that, like those particles, we are instrumental in the building of something new that we have no idea what it is. But the idea that the relationships we enter into enable the universe to bring forward a higher level of complexity because we enter into those relationships is pretty astounding. So this was another thing that he said that I thought was really beautiful, that the universe as a whole is pervaded with cosmological care. And it knows how to create life in humans who are conscious because that's what it did. So one of the ways that he described human consciousness, and this is something I hope y'all will really think about, because it feels like to me, so many of the things he said reminded me of this tradition. And this particular sentence, that humans innately have a primordial desire to know the nature of reality and to heal those who suffer. And so, one of the things that Buddhism of all traditions, and, I'm just more familiar with this one than others, is that where we really get into trouble is when we think we know the nature of reality and we don't. We think we're these little separate things, right? As opposed to this being a part of this incredible bit of complexity that we all are. I mean, one of the things I love to say, just as one example, because there are millions of them, but to think about how you might have been feeling and thinking and doing before you got on this call. And then think about how you're feeling right now, what you're thinking about, kind of maybe what hormones are floating around, what emotions are floating around. It's different. You're not the same as, before you got on the call. And when we get off the call, we'll be different again. So all of us are being impacted by each other. I mean, we are changing each other even as we're sitting here talking and listening and looking at each other. And so to say, oh, well, I'm this fixed thing, I'm this me that's fixed and independent of all that, is kind of a little bit nuts. Actually, it's a kind of a reality that isn't really what reality is. And that shifting into just even being curious about these ideas is just so much potential to take us out of impoverishment. I mean, this sentence that humans have a primordial desire to know the nature of reality and to heal those who suffer. Now, compare that to the doctrine of original sin. I mean, think about it. This thing Augustine came up with in the 3rd century when the Roman Empire took over whatever was the church at the time. This idea that we're born bad, we're just born bad, man, and we need something to save us from our own iniquity, is a good word, from that world. Well, infinite numbers of Christians would not go along with that anymore, but I don't know about you all, but I feel like that that doctrine of original sin has really permeated Western thinking and all this achievement, and you got to improve, you got to do better, and you got to, whatever, because, you're just pretty bad to begin with. So, um, and it was quite interesting because one of the things they were saying, and I don't know when he said it or to whom he said it, but Gandhi actually said, you all have got to get rid of the doctrine of original sin. It's killing you. So I think the idea that impoverishment can come from having the wrong view of the universe about the way things are related to each other, and also some of the wrong views that we may have gotten from any number of traditions. So being liberated from that kind of thinking and being liberated into this idea of, just resting into this phenomenally complex web of relationships, which are always nurturing me and which I am also nurturing. I'm contributing to that nourishment. And, to think that, and I think this is one of the reasons actually they did this course, is because they're just worried about how despondent people are about the climate crisis, and that so many people feel like there's nothing I can do, or even if I do a little something, it's not going to make any difference. But to think, again, from these teachings and from this new physics, that everything is resting in potential, and that the potentialities that get realized are going to depend a whole lot on what we do, actually. So, it's like, oh my God, I just want to say this one thing. I want to say 10,000 things. That's the problem. But I'm going to say this one thing. And then I'm going to stop talking and just see if you all want to react to this at all. If anybody wants to add to it, react to it, see how it strikes you. But anyway, I've really been deep down into this. Last night was the 7th consecutive week, 2 hours each night. And yesterday I had a lunch meeting with the Reverend James Forbes. I think I've mentioned him before. He's a really well-known African-American figure who was the first Black pastor of Riverside Church in New York City. Anyway, he lives here now, which is amazing. And he and I have been having all these conversations. So I met him for lunch yesterday because I really am wanting to know what are Black theologians thinking about all these different things, and to see about, well, how does this tradition fit in with their view of things, particularly liberation theology. Anyway, we're having all these conversations, but I promise you, had not said word one to this man about all this, physics and Fox and Swim, nothing. I had said not one word to this guy. So we sit down for lunch, and he gets out his little briefcase and he said, I brought you a present. I'm like, what? I was kind of shocked. He said, I have a book I want to give you. I said, okay. And he brings out this little tiny book written by an Italian physicist about this topic. He said, I just think you need to read this. Okay. So, I think I'll just say, speaking of relationships and potentiality, the field is sort of wide open. Okay. I'm just going to take a pause from saying so many things. I just want to see if anybody, Carla, I will have to go find the title, which means I have to find the book. I might have to send it to you, but we'll see. I might be able to find it before we hang up. Anybody feel like commenting at the moment? Sarah.
I just want to say that I've been doing at least a mala a day of the Tara of the month. Plus, I got into this because Lama Rod was saying, do a mala of medicine Buddha every day. And I had been kind of, whatever. I did whatever I did. And now I've been doing several malas of various mantras a day. And I really do find it extremely helpful.
Huh.
The Tara of the month and Medicine Buddha and the Prajnaparamita mantra, which there's a whole other out there, because other people probably want to talk. But that's really, really helpful in keeping me from losing time.
Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful. And that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, there's I don't know if any of y'all get the Lion's Roar. They send out something several days a week. And there was an article called Why We Chant, which is in my list of things I need to read. But I just feel pretty confident that it says what I think probably what most of us experience is that these ancient syllables, these resonant syllables, carry this vibration of what they mean, right? And so if you're asking Tara, like this one asks her to increase material and spiritual wealth, and you're really asking for all beings, and you're chanting that mantra, the vibration of that meaning is going through your whole body. So it's going through your physical body with that nervous system that has had so many shocks. But it's also going through the subtle body. It's going through the formless body. Oh, look, Mary, thank you so much. Mary just put in a link to that article. Let's see, was I right or what? Mary the genius. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Sarah. I think, and can I ask you this? Like if you are not feeling so great and you do the chanting and it sort of settle things down, does that bring a certain kind of joy? Yeah.
I'm not unmuted. Yeah, I have some physical stuff, like my digestion doesn't work right. And so my vagus nerve gets very anxious. And I also have been worrying about climate change since the 70s.
Yeah.
It's just in me to see it. And it occurred to me recently, and you talked about this last time, there was some meeting of somebody who thought about this sort of web of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking, well, it's kind of like the fungus mycelium. There's this thing, and then I can't do something, if I do these practices, I'm strengthening that field.
That's true, Sarah.
And also, we've been doing a bunch of study on death and dying. I found out that Lama Justin has something called Death and Dying Studio or something on Bhumi Sparcha that I want to be part of, because those people are very accomplished. Lama Justin himself and all the people who are in that group, like awesome people in that group, that there's just this sense that everything's just kind of going along in a continuum. It's not like suffer, die, be judged, It's more like just kind of keep going along, and it will change, and then it will be this, and it will be that, and who knows what. But I'm finding that tremendously comforting. And for, I know you know about this. My husband just went through this long bardo of recovering from having his heart cut open and worked on, and problems with meds and shit. So it's all very, very vivid. And thinking this is just this ongoing process. That's not a big deal at some all off the cliff, is very helpful. And it's tremendously comforting.
That's great. Thank
I
you.
wake up and have fear at night, and I just mantra away, whichever one wants to come up. I'm not in charge of it now. It's doing me.
Thank you, Sarah. That's great. I love that. Okay, we've got Lauren and Velma. Let's hear from the two of you, and then we will.
Hi. If I may, I'd like to shift a little bit from climate change. Um, this whole relationship and potentiality that you've been speaking of, it strikes me really deeply.
Mm,
In that while I can feel this, um, honor this, practice this in my own personal life, I teach 600 kids a week, and this is my 28th year.
Oh, God.
and I work with um young people who deal with a lot.
Mm,
Um and I'm often just surprised that they even show up to school. And
mm,
when I look at this reality in which I work, I have to recognize the anxiety, the isolation, the loneliness um,
mm,
that these students deal with, largely due to the pandemic, to poverty. Um, Certainly not of spirit, but of, providing for family and whatnot. And I sit here and I think, yeah, this is all accurate. This is all truth.
mhm,
This is all correct. And yet, the reality in which I work, um, I see tremendous anxiety and loneliness and poverty every day. And how to build bridges
mm,
to lessen that gap
mm,
is very much on my mind in listening to you tonight. um, how to foster stronger relationships, but also how to engender connections and relationships um, about reality with these students so that, it alleviates some of this
mm,
poverty on any level and opens potentiality on every level.
mhm,
I'm lucky I teach art. So I
mm.
think about, through creative capacity all the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
But
Wow.
I don't know. I would just like to hear your thoughts about this because
Mm,
while I know this is truth, there are other realities.
right. Loring, I think about that all the time, and I think that I really do think about it all the time.
Me too.
Yeah, and I think multiple things, but one thing I just guess I have to say that, and this might be hard for you because you're the person there, but when I'm listening to you talk, I'm just thinking, oh my God, these children are so lucky to have you as a teacher. So, because you're thinking like this, so even when you're in the room with them with all these realities, you're not missing anything. So it's like you're bearing witness to them, whether you say anything or not. You know what I mean? And so I just think that's more important than it's not nothing. Can I say that?
I appreciate that. And yet, and I'm fortunate in that I was always a non-traditional student, so I'm a very non-traditional teacher. And I push hard for my students to have access and opportunity. But I don't want to shift the focus onto me.
I know. No, I know.
You know
I
what?
yeah,
I'm just
I
really
do. I also want to say that part of what you have to do, part of what I have to do, what part of what we all have to do is not lose this core sense of truth in the face of really incredible despair. And I think for me, one of the ways I get there is by thinking I'm not doing enough about the reality that I'm facing, right? And so I'm not trying to, buff you up or sugarcoat anything. I just really mean it. I think it's and here's a thought, and I just don't know how you would ever say this, but one of the things that Matthew Fox talks about a lot, I mean, of course, his whole world from so long has been the Christian mystic, Julian of Norwich in particular. And what they're both saying is that they see from, however, all this stuff with the Webb telescope, blah, 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 that there's just this inherent goodness at the nature, at the center of everything, which fits with these teachings about basic goodness. And that Julian of Norwich had this very famous saying, "You were loved since before you were born." And what the telescope is showing is that these patterns that ultimately billions of years later ended up producing human consciousness, it was all in the pattern to begin with. And that really fits with what Julian was saying. And I'm having this big time fantasy. I don't know how in the world you would ever say this to those children. But sometimes kids are interested in the Dalai Lama. One of the things he's very famous for is saying people need to be loved from before they're born until after they die. I mean, it might be interesting to do an art project with these children, saying, there are these people out there that have been talking about you were loved since before you were born. I mean, I don't know. You're creative, you're non-traditional, but it feels like the key thing is, and this is what's true for me, is not to lose that continuous push forward from that place of this inherent goodness that's in you and them. And yeah.
I appreciate that. I want to see those patterns more. And yeah, there is an African proverb that's very similar to what you just said. And it is that knowing that the ancestors have loved you since before you were born. So that I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we have to move on, but boy,
thank you.
I could talk to you for a long time and listen to you for a long time too. So thank you.
Likewise.
So I think maybe we should move on. And I know Velma wanted to say something, and so maybe Velma, you can save that and say it at the end. But it feels like it could be a good time to practice now. To just also know that that compassion really does derive from this understanding of the way things are interrelated. That is the basis for compassion. And to really know that part of our job is like when we see this goodness out there, whether it's the goodness, you can see it you can actually see it in a flower or a tree, or in a person. It's just everywhere that it can be seen. To let that be sort of the lodestar, the guiding star, the incarnate proof of what we're talking about, and to never lose sight of that. Yeah, and to also say that, like, the idea of community is the actual meaning of it is to share a common task. And so to think of what might be happening on the earth now, and I think it's part of our community because we really do end up talking about multiple traditions, is that we're trying to make a community out of communities. We're trying to make a universal community out of all these communities on the planet. And many of us belong to multiple communities. So we're sort of in a position to ponder these things, live into these things, practice with these things in mind, and have some deep trust that these urges we have towards help and healing and practice are these innate tendencies in us, and we need to honor them and to honor ourselves, right? And that doesn't have anything to do with ego, actually. Nothing. It's just more like, wow, I get to be part of this. I get to participate. And what I do matters. Not because I'm so fabulous, but because I'm just one of these beings. And what I do actually matters. So let's practice. And this is a lot, I mean, a whole lot of information. I hope that everyone can sense that no matter what we're talking about, we're really just talking about one thing, ultimately. And that one thing is in us and around us and permeating everything. So why don't we do this practice, and then we'll just see what is left to be said by anyone. Okay, so yeah, here's a moment to see if there's a deep breath that wants to find you. You can also just be curious about what is going on with your breath. How is your breath breathing you in the moment? And to sort of touch on that lightly, let your awareness rest there lightly. And at the same time, let your awareness rest on some inner image of space, a beautiful image, your favorite image of space, that when you call it up, it also calls up sensation of vastness and potential. And to really realize that that image of space is also an image of your own awakened consciousness, which is also vast and also indistinguishable from the space outside of us. And so then we're going to imagine out of everything that could arise out of that potential, that we're going to invite the entire mandala of Tara to come forward. It's almost like, again, some of you are artists, some of you are better visualizers than others, but you can still feel it, even if you can't see it. Just this idea that this whole mandala of Tara, and there's an image of it behind me if that's useful. It's like green Tara in the center, surrounded by all the 21 Taras. These female Buddhas, emanations, are appearing in bodies of subtle light. So they're appearing in forms that you can actually see them, and you can imagine the light in these various colors radiating from them. But you also know it's like a rainbow. If you went to touch one of them, your hand would go through it because it's light. They're not actual form bodies. They're all bodies, subtle bodies of light. And at the center of the mandala is green Tara. Wow. Yeah. This awakened female Buddha who has this story behind her of an actual woman who refused to go along with some pretty impoverished teachings of her time, that only men could become enlightened. She's like, no way, no way that can be true. And then she made this very famous vow to become enlightened only in a female body, because there were no female Buddhas at the time. So let's just say she had a point to make, and it was a good one. She chose to make it. So she makes this famous vow. I don't know, this is like the 5th century or the 6th century, to work for the benefit of all beings, into endless time. And she finally became an awakened Buddha herself. And so we imagine her in the center of this mandala in this subtle body of green light. And if you can sense in any way that she's gazing at you, like she's really looking at you with this amazing, amazing gaze of compassion and sight. She sees us. And we can gaze back at her. It's like you're looking in the mirror. She is an outer representation of an inner reality that we sometimes can't quite feel is true. But she's here to remind us of that. And then we just see her surrounded by all of her various emanations and these various colors, but they're all seated on these beautiful lotus thrones. And they're all really, in the Atisha tradition, they're all in the same position. And they're not holding this variety of instruments that you see in the Suryagata tradition. And so we see Tara surrounded by all of her emanations. And then I like to imagine, we're inviting now our teachers. And I like to just imagine them kind of surrounding green Tara, like they're nestled into this mandala, like right all around her. And to think of specifically, who are they? What traditions do they come from? They may not all be Buddhist by any imagination. They may be living on this plane at this moment. They may be living in other planes. But to call on those teachers that you feel some kind of real blessing and connection, something that wakes you up to the beauty and truth of who you are and who they were. And so think of them and who they were, and imagine them just surrounding Tara. And then, you can also, here we can imagine the ancestors, the compassionate, helpful ancestors, the spirits of the land. Yeah. Just calling on all these beings to participate in the practice, support the practice, and help us with our deep intentions. And then we can imagine that we're surrounded by our friends and loved ones and supporters, and they are surrounded by their friends and loved ones and supporters, and it really becomes finally an infinite number of beings. And at Tara's feet, imagine that you can place any particular people you're concerned about, close or far away. And we can also put, these general situations. There's so many of them. Morocco, Libya, Ukraine, there are many more. I mean, the United States, for goodness sake. All the people all over the world who are hungry. We can put all of our concerns at Tara's feet, and especially thinking about this practice we're getting ready to do, so that then we can really think and pray, like, for all of these beings and with all of these beings, I can go for refuge in this vast awakened consciousness that Tara embodies and represents and reflects back to me. And I can take refuge in the Dharma, the wisdom teachings of all the traditions that I have been part of. and the ones that I might know something about and am interested in, and that I can take refuge again in the ancestors and the spirits of the land, all the teachers, and that I can take refuge in my sanghas, and that would be this one, this sangha, but also you may belong to other sanghas, and also the sanghas of the ancestors, the lineage people who've practiced for generations before us, which is why we still have this practice. And the fact that we're practicing is going to be part of why people who come after us will have the practice. So the shorthand for that is I can take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and that I can ask through the power of giving and the other perfections that I could wake up 100% in order to be a benefit to myself and to all living beings, every kind of living being. And that I could pray that all beings would have happiness and the causes of happiness, that all beings would be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow, that all beings could come to realize we cannot be separated from the sacred happiness, which is sorrowless, and that we might live in equanimity without too much attachment to those we hold close or too much aversion for those we keep at a distance, that we could live believing in the equality of all that lives. Om Sabashir Sarva Dharma Sabashito. So that's the mantra of emptiness. Gives us, another reminder that everything, nothing, no phenomena exists inherently on its own. And so with that reminder, it's, our consciousness turns again to this vast potential of interconnectivity. And in that moment, we invite this particular emanation of Tara, orange poverty removing Tara, to come into the foreground. And it's interesting because she's described as having a peaceful expression, but she's also got this hum in the center of her forehead that the praise describes as she's agitating that hum with a frown. So she's kind of got this mixed energy, but the general idea is peace, that she is really bringing peace and pacifying the causes of these destructive things. So she has this peaceful expression. She's got this orange vase in her open right hand, and her hand is at her heart in the gesture of refuge. And her top three chakras are adorned with the syllables Om, Aham. And this blue syllable hum, the syllable of wisdom, is emanating this ray of blue light into the realms of the wisdom beings and initiatory deities, inviting them to come here. Hey, za, bam, ho. Just imagine that these energetic forms of Tara come and they join in with the mandala, and all these Buddhas and the beings of their mandalas, these dakinis, all these awakened beings respond to that call. You try to sense that they're present. And then we ask the awakened ones, the Tathagatas, we ask for purification. Om Sarva Tathagata Avashit Saman. And here, what I'd really like to imagine is, we're going to envision these dakinis, these powerful female entities, pouring this light into our open crown chakra. And that this light is just pouring through us. And what I like to think of as purification it's like a relief of having any kind of sticky stuff that's, yeah, leftover residue from difficult emotions, experiences, feelings, whatever. And that it's just kind of a relief to get this amazing light bath. It just pours through all the different ways that we are. Energy, space, form. This light is moving through all of that. And really, as it moves out of us, it's like taking all that stuff with it as it moves out of our bodies. And then we imagine one of the dakinis is pouring the same nectar into the open crown chakra of orange, poverty removing Tara. This one drop overflows and forms the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light. It's actually what his name means. And then he appears just above her crown in a subtle body of red light. So there's all this light and energy, healing, pouring out of this mandala. And so I like to think of this as a moment where we can make personal offerings to Tara, like you can offer her anything you want, a hope, a frustration, a desire, something you want to let go of, a regret, anything, frustration, yeah, wisdom, we could just offer her everything. And imagine that she takes everything we offer her, everything. And as she takes this is sort of the stuff of our life, It's like the mud, the beauty, the everything. She takes everything we offer her and blesses it. And really sort of like it's blessing our lives, the good and the bad and everything in between, turning it into wisdom, actually an insight. And then showering us with these blessings. And just imagine that. What is it that we really learn from our very own life, our struggles, our hopes, etc.? And then we enter into the traditional offering practice. Ambensam Rita Kundali, Hana Hana Humpe, Om Sabawashita Sawa Dharma Sabawashidoham. So again, we just briefly focus on vastness, emptiness, space, potential. We focus on that for a moment. And we also imagine that this blue wrathful deity, Amrita Kundali, is emerging from our heart chakra and just gobbling up all the obstacles to our practice, any obstacle to our practice whatsoever, including the what the heck am I doing here obstacle, or my imagination is not really functioning all that well tonight obstacle. Every obstacle, just imagine that he gobbles it up. He loves doing that because it's his job. It's like something Mary said earlier tonight. It's like he's supporting our practice. So he just takes care of all those obstacles, dissolves back into our heart chakra. He remains there as a protector. And then we focus on space and we really try to imagine, because it's actually happening, the syllable Om vibrating through space and matter. It's like the syllable of awakened consciousness that's always there. This vibration is in the field. And that is, as it's really, doing that vibrating, it's creating these beautiful jeweled vessels. Each one of them, we could call it a treasure vase. Each one of them has an Om inside of it. And from those vessels begin to pour out these wonderful offering substances like a feast for Tara and all the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas. It's a true Indian tradition of offering these things to guests. And so they're our guests. And so we're offering them this feast of water and incense, light, music, food, candles, and so on. And so we just imagine these offering substances pouring out of these vessels. Like you can really have fun with that. Like I like to say sometimes, cathedrals full of candles, just enjoy imagining all these amazing offering substances, clear, unhindered, and unending. Om Aham, Om Aham, Om Aham. Om Aryatara, Sapariwara, Argam, Pajam, Puspe, Dupe, Alake, Genje, Nevaje, Shabda Pratitsum, Soha. So that's our invitation to the beings to enjoy these offerings. And if you have this anywhere, the cards or the book or whatever, please read the praise. If not, you can just listen. I praise the one who has the power to summon all the assemblies of the protectors of the world, who liberates all beings from destitution through the letter hum, agitated by her wrathful frowning. And so then we're going to visualize that from her heart, from this vase in her hand, these orange rays of light are streaming out in the form of hooks out into the 10 directions, and then just gathering up material wealth from all these directions, pacifying poverty, and also bringing spiritual wealth, like loving kindness and compassion, and really this profound understanding of emptiness or interrelatedness or interconnection. So, that's a lot to think about, but just this general idea, this light is streaming out and gathering up all this wealth. It's like Tara is distributing wealth. She's a Robin Hood of the Vajrayana tradition, taking wealth from where it's not needed and sending it to where it is needed. And really to imagine that these spiritual gifts are coming with it. This deep desire for people to feel loved and cherished and cared for, no matter what their circumstances are. So that's what we're visualizing. And this mantra actually only means we're asking Tara to increase the wealth. So it's one of the shorter, simpler mantras. Om Tari Tu Tari Turi Basadari Soha. 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 Om Tari Tutari Turbasadari 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 Soha. Om Tari Tutari Soha. Om Tari Tutari Turbasadari 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 Soha. Om Tari Tutari Turibastari 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 Soha. So one thing, there's so many things we could contemplate or just feel in this resonant field of the mantras. You know, it's always important to rest in the field and also have a little bit of alertness to what might come to you. Yeah, what little bit of wisdom or love or care or a feeling in the body. This combination, like Maciek Loptron was very famous for this statement: relax, 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 alert, 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 and one right after the other. But I feel like it's a very relaxed kind of loving attention, just to see if there's anything that shows up, or any part of us that shows up that needs our love or attention. And it occurs to me, just as a tiny practice, something we could all do at different points, is if you think about what is a major sort of impoverishment for me. Is it loneliness? Is it lack of trust? Not knowing my own true nature? Being separated from that? Think for just a second. What is my really, what is one of my biggest sources of impoverishment? And then to imagine there are countless people all over the world who might be feeling it right now, or who have certainly felt it or will feel it. Countless people. And because you know what that feels like, in this moment, you can wish for every one of those beings, every one of them, to have that just dissolve, whatever that was, and to wish with every fiber of your being that all those countless beings, including yourself, would feel the love and the wealth of loving kindness and compassion that is within you and also in the universe, and that you can literally send that out to anyone who might have felt anything like what you have felt. That's just an idea. A little bit like Tonglen. And so just let that go. Just come back, gradually come back to seeing the mandala again, just refocusing on the mandala, the whole thing, then imagining orange Tara receding back into the mandala, taking her place among all the other emanations. And then we thank all of our teachers, all the beings, all the many, many, many beings that we invited either to support us in the practice or to participate or benefit from it. We thank them all for coming. We offer them our gratitude. And then we ask that they return to the realms from which they came, and we just imagine that happening. And then we're looking only at the mandala of Tara, all these brilliant, multicolored light bodies, these emanations of Tara with green Tara in the middle, and then just imagining that entire mandala dissolving into light. And then seeing that light spread throughout this vast universe. I mean, actually going back to the beginning of time, because I think that's kind of how it works. It's radiating into the past, it's radiating in the present, it's radiating into the future. It's all one thing. And we just see this light dissolving into the vastness of the universe and feeding this blessed energy into the field, strengthening this field. Yeah. Making that contribution until finally we're really left again with this vast image of space. And we dedicate this practice. And we also remember that light has come into us. It's important not to forget that either. Just dissolving also into us. As that's happening, we dedicate the practice. We ask that whatever positive potential, whatever energy, whatever nourishment has been created by our doing this practice together tonight, that it goes to the healing and awakening of all beings everywhere. That includes us, all beings everywhere with absolutely no exceptions. And we give thanks for Tara and the teacher and the teachings and each other and the opportunity to practice together. Oops. And the cat who just knocked the bells on the floor. So, so I wonder if anybody wants to say anything at this moment. And if you do, you can raise your hand, and so we can have a little line, but you can also just unmute. I think there's a lot of wisdom sitting out there in potential. I'm just wondering if anybody wants to let it manifest in form. And also just to say, if anybody feels like you need to sign off and jump in bed, that's fine too. Yeah. Susan, are you, yeah.
Yeah. The course that you spoke about with Matt Fox and Brian Swim, the line that has stayed with me so much is that if you want to study the history of humanity, study the history of the universe. And I was thinking of that line when Lorraine was talking, because the thing that has struck me so much is that wonderful photo of the universe from the Webb telescope that shows the pillars of the universe, that incredible stardust nursery of stars. And it just lights such an imagination within me of our possibilities and the vastness of who we are within the universe. And I was just thinking if somehow in her way she could convey that to her students, that glorious, magnificent, creative universe that's out there, but also within ourselves.
Yeah.
It just, that has stayed with me, and it has just generated so much within me. I just wanted to pass that on. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that I think I'm gonna make a quick one quick look to see if that book is where I think it is, and I'll put the title in the chat box. It's going to be very quick. And while I'm doing that, somebody else might want to say something. And I know that we all need to go to bed, but I'm going to look real quick and see if I see this.
I'm wondering if Velma still wanted to speak.
I wonder if she's still here. So I did find it. And I'll put it in here, but it's 7 Brief Lessons on Physics. And I haven't read it yet, y'all. So here we go. There it is, the book and the author. So I think since everyone is being so quiet, Dana is asking, how do you use orange practice in everyday personal life? honestly, Dana, I think I really think that question can best be answered by each one of us, you know? That's, this little bit that I did right at the very end where I said, think about what is impoverishing to you. What kind of thoughts are impoverishing? Sometimes I think, what is a liberating, like if I get really down about everything that's going on, and it's easy to do, I'll ask myself, what is a liberating thought here? And the answer is always different, but it's almost like the awakened mindset might be, when you're in one of these states, like if you're not going to sit down to an actual practice, but to maybe even just go outside and to look for beauty, look for beauty. Or you've got this beautiful baby, right? Huh. Let's see. There we go. I think also, to me, one of the things that I do a fair amount these days, because I am so interested in relationship, it's like today I was at Whole Foods and somebody in front of the cashier was talking about how everything had changed and she hated all the changes and blah, blah. And what I was thinking, and I appreciate that, and what I was thinking about is there's so many people who've been working there for so many years and they've stayed through all those changes. And this guy was one of them. And so when she left, I said to him, one of the things that hasn't changed, that's you all who work here, and the ways in which you're kind to us, and that you've stuck it out, and we can look forward to seeing you. And so it's like this idea of seeing him, really seeing him, and then saying something. I think we all like to be seen. And so it's sort of like almost in the moment that we see someone else, we're also seeing something about ourselves. But I think we can be very creative about how to use this in everyday life. I mean, I would love to hear what you come up with, honestly. That smile is a good one. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That really did answer it. As I'm trying to multitask and
Right.
listen, but it was like, okay, how do I bring this mantra in? And because of course, like when I think of like impoverished, is like, of course, the first thing that's coming to mind is like suffering and this and that, like a very grand scale, which is important.
Yeah.
But I also need to, like, my practice, especially at this particular moment in my life, needs to be like in now.
Yeah.
What can I do, my practice now? So I like that I can call on like the orange star, like if I'm having thoughts like that aren't, expansive, aren't those things to help me through. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And Dan, I would just think it's so important because if you're nourished, if you are nourished, if you feel inherently valuable, that's just going to go right on to that beautiful child of yours. So I can imagine that every single one of us wants that for you. That's not hard to imagine right this minute. So thank you for the question. Yeah, appreciate it, and for speaking up. So it's 9:00. I think probably, it's time to call it a night. But anyway, it's been wonderful to be with you all. Yeah. I hope you find a lot of joy and beauty and awe and amazement and relationships and, all kinds of spiritual wealth and spread it, figure out ways to spread it in your own beautiful way. I'll see you next month. So good night, everybody.
No.
Good night. Feel free to unmic.
Good night.
Happy
Happy fall.
equinox.
Good night.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.